Welcome to the Alan MacArthur Foundation's Disruptive Innovation Festival, a month-long festival of innovation entrepreneurship and ideas for building a circular economy. This session on financial systems change is part of the rules of the game tent within the festival, where we're exploring the enabling system conditions for a wide-scale transition towards a circular economy. I'm delighted to be joined by Marshall Clemens, who's dialing in live from Boston in the US. Marshall is the creator of one of the most successful efforts to map the financial system through his work with Idiagram and the Tellus Mater Foundation. Marshall will be available online to discuss and answer questions on a variety of topics, including systems innovation and the challenges of trying to enact systems change, the changing economy and how the financial sector fits into this, and the possibilities of change within the finance community. For those eager festival goers online now, you may have also noticed some content which we uploaded today. So we've got 3 short videos. One is a primer on systems innovation. The second is a map of the current financial system or the economy. The third is a map of the sustainable finance system specifically. And in addition to that, there's a kind of PDF or an infographic showing the systems innovation process. As participants, you're going to have the opportunity to take part and to send questions using either the Google chat function if you're logged in as a Google user, or alternative, you don't have a Google account, you can also send us a message using Twitter using hashtag ThinkDiff. So that's ThinkDiff with DIF, 1F. You can send things through on Twitter. The session we've got today is going to last for about 40 minutes, and we've basically got Marshall to be able to ask him a series of questions about what he's done in this systems mapping exercise, and also more broadly as an expert in systems innovation. So just lastly, again, for questions, the whole idea is you can partake in this and ask questions through into Marshall, and I'll help to facilitate that. Please either use the Google chat question function or send through to Twitter at hashtag ThinkDiff. So without much further ado, I'm going to go over to Marshall now and actually ask him some initial questions, which, having viewed the content and myself earlier on today, I'm pretty interested to find out a bit more on. So firstly, Marshall, how did this map actually come about? You know, why did you create this? What was it that kind of made you get into this?
Well, thanks. It's great to be here, and be happy to go back and talk about the genesis of doing this map on the economy and finance change in particular. I had actually, for years and years, wanted to do a project on the economy because it is about the economy, stupid. If you want to think about how to drive change, whether it's within anywhere within society, the economic system is of course the driver of so much of what actually goes on. So, and it was just the perfect kind of really big, complex problem to which the kind of system mapping and system thinking work we've been doing would be the perfect application. So, however, it was difficult to find a client who would actually want to fund that work. So in most of the corporate work we're doing, the problems are much more specific. But through a project I was working on, I met Charmian Love from Volans, who said, hey, we're doing this this whole meeting on the breakthrough economy. And she invited me to speak at that. Through that, I met Kelly Clark from the Tellus Mater Foundation. And we started working about 2.5 years ago now on mapping out both the broader economy and then the role of finance within that. And the problem they were grappling with is that Kelly, even though she had come from banking, was charged now with how do we begin to drive change within finance to make it a more functional driver of the green economy. And even though she was an expert in the space, it was really difficult to know where to begin, like who was actually doing good work that could be funded to actually drive change in finance. So for their own internal strategy about where they were going to give grants, they needed to get a better grasp on not just what the finance system looked like, but who was doing good and interesting work, and where they should put their investments. So that began this process of mapping out, what the economy and finance system looks like, and who's doing what in terms of trying to create change, and where is change really needed, where are the leverage points of change. And I'm not an expert in finance, so it took a while, which was kind of good because I was able to ask the right kind of stupid questions. But we were eventually able to put the framework in place, at least around where we could start to look at where interesting interventions are. And I don't think the map now gives us any really hard specific answers, but again, at least it gives us that framework for understanding where change might be important. So that it has been just as fascinating a problem as I thought it would be, and there's still plenty of work to do on mapping out the broader, more comprehensive and more detailed, theory of change around where we think the finance system is broken and what we need to do to fix it.
And just to describe for those people who may not have had time to watch the videos in advance, the first time I came across Marshall's map was at a kind of workshop where we had a whole bunch of different people interested in finance and kind of systemic change around that. And this map is so huge, so big, you can't really put it on a kind of A4 or A3 piece of paper. You really need a wall to actually outline this. And basically what it is an enormous, as Marshall says, systems map demonstrating the kind of entire financial universe, right the way from different asset types, all the different actors within that community. But Marshall, maybe you can describe a little bit more about what's in there, kind of what the scope of that was, and how you went about actually putting that together.
Yeah, so the systems maps that we create are specifically designed to help us grapple with the actual complexity of the problem we're dealing with. And one of the fundamental issues we're trying to address is just cognitively we don't think through problems very well with more than 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 moving pieces. So when you've got a problem which has 2 or 3 dozen important pieces, all of which can interact, the challenge is how do you make sense of all of that? How do you grasp it? How do you think your way through that sort of problem? And that's where having a visual map that actually explicitly shows those pieces and how they're connected, I think is the right tool for that job. So in a positive sense, it is a tool to help you think through the complexity. However, it is really complex, and as you say, it's often very large, has lots of pieces, and for example, I'm not sure how well all those pieces come through on the videos I did, because even in HD video, it's probably very difficult to see what's actually on the map. So there's actually a technology issue there around how you navigate that complexity, how you move from the sort of simple overview down to specific details, how you can zoom in and out, how you create either printed versions, which are great, or how do you put them online in a way that's navigable. So one of the things we're working on going forward is how to put in place better technology to help you navigate the complexity of that map. And the initial reaction of the maps is always usually that they're overwhelmingly complex, always if you put them up all at once. So what we try to do, I've tried to do in the videos, is if you walk through them piece by piece, they're actually very easy to grasp, but you need that kind of slow build to help you understand what the different pieces are and how they fit together.
Yeah, sure. And just another thing, before we go to some of the questions that are coming in, we hear a lot the kind of phrase systems innovation, and I imagine that some people, when you hear these phrases used a lot, kind of new ideas come along in terms of how you think through problems. Quite often, they don't necessarily come with a kind of description as to what that actually means. And I know that you're someone who's worked for really quite some time in that discipline of systems innovation, and that I really kind of took that away as well from that PDF with the different phases. Would you be able to just kind of give us a little bit of an insight into what is the discipline of systems innovation, and kind of why is that important, and why are people interested in it now? And just a little bit of background on that topic would be really interesting.
Sure. So I suppose the central point about systems innovation, which makes it different from what I call discrete innovation, is that in a discrete innovation is something that either you can do as an individual or a group or a company. So a particular product or technology or innovation that you can create and build and either put out in the marketplace or somehow implement within your group or organization. When you move to what we're calling the systems, and some of those products may be systems of technology, et cetera, but when we talk about the systems innovation, we're talking about things that you cannot create or implement on your own. So you need, somehow there's an ecosystem of other players or other systems in which you need to operate, but you don't have control over those other aspects. So somehow you need to bring together that ecosystem, that multi-stakeholder set of people, to decide that you actually all want to change the way you're operating. So that's where it becomes incredibly important to have this participatory process that brings everybody along together to recognize that change is needed, that they do all want to change, and then how you're going to actually do it. What are you going to change, and how you're going to change things going forward. So you need this shared strategy of how you're all going to kind of move together to create that new system, that new way of operating. So I think that's the heart of it, and a lot of the times where we're stuck, where we see the big problems we're trying to address and we're not making progress, I think we're stuck exactly on that issue, is that there are certain individuals who have good ideas, or everybody kind of knows that things are crazy and broken, but no one, any particular actor is powerless to change it. So you need, change has to come through a kind of shared desire to move along together.
And just to kind of cover that a little bit more, so once you've, in the model that you've mentioned, that's quite kind of consensual. Everybody's up for change. People come together, they agree with each other, and they get on with it. Obviously, in reality, you may have some actors who don't want to change for whatever reason. There may be a vested interest. It may be that there's bureaucracy, inertia, politics, various things that stop that happening. Have you seen examples, and is there an application of the kind of systems innovation and the systems map to disrupt things? So actually to help new product ideas to enter the financial system, which might actually be able to almost have a disproportionately large impact in disrupting the incumbents. How do you kind of see that versus everybody kind of agreeing and consensually and coming together?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the picture we paint of doing systems innovation is this kind of happy kumbaya, we're all going to come together and create the marvelous new future collaboratively and voluntarily, and that of course is not always the case, and sometimes there's no getting around that. And in this last video I made the point of, it is about creative destruction, and often there is the destructive end. There is a role for the muckrakers and the Greenpeaces of the world to go out and try to stop things in their tracks. So at the one hand, you want to be able to build the upside of the new way of doing things to make that more attractive, and while simultaneously kind of destroying the business models of the old way of doing things. And in this kind of systems change, you have to acknowledge that there are almost always going to be winners and losers, and you have to acknowledge that some people are going to lose out of this change. You either need to compensate them or somehow bring them along in that. But sometimes that's going to be an impossible barrier to overcome. However, I kind of have this dream, however, of creating a logical argument so perfectly so perfectly irrefutable in its logic that that no one could disagree. So you'd even like get the Koch brothers on board with saying, yeah, you're right. I cannot argue with that. You're right. We have to go forward. So I do still have this strange naive power in or belief in the power of logic and clear thinking. So I hope we can move a little bit away towards that, because yeah, ideally you'd like to be able to work not with the people who already believe in your cause. You don't want to be always singing to the choir. You want to bring along the people who actually disagree with you. So I'm not sure really how to do that well, but it's an important point.
Yeah, sure. And so one of the questions that I've asked you enough of my own questions. I'm going to go now live to some of the questions we've got coming in on chat. And I guess the first one is, firstly, we've got a lot of people saying that the maps that you've created are both very beautiful and incredibly interesting to look at. I think just from a almost artistic perspective, the amount of detail in them is quite incredible. One of the questions I've got is, how do you, so you've mentioned that you obviously can use this to understand the system better. What kind of roles or how have you used those maps before? What kind of people do you find them useful, and what do they get out of it, and how may they be able to apply that?
Yeah, and this question actually often kind of comes up about either what do you see that is really unique and new through doing the systems work that you didn't know before, and how does that specifically lead to real actions that you wouldn't have taken before, which is a very fair question, and the answer sometimes seems to be kind of a cop-out, because often when you build the map, in retrospect, it's kind of obvious, and there may be nothing on there that you didn't or somebody didn't already know before, but the power comes in putting those things all together in context and being able to engage that kind of collective intelligence and shared knowledge by bringing everybody's perspectives together on one page. So it's often not necessarily about seeing anything particularly new and groundbreaking, but it's being able to see all the different ideas, all the different pieces, and how they connect. So in some ways, it's actually a good outcome when the map in retrospect is obvious, because it does make sense to everybody. And then in terms of the kind of direct practical action that creates, sometimes there are specific plans that come out of that. Perhaps more often, and perhaps even more valuable, it just gives everybody this shared sense, the shared mental model of what the problem is and how to fix it. And then they can go off and they can do their own things. It's not about everybody being in absolute lockstep, but it is about everybody kind of being on the same, literally on the same page in terms of the general direction of where we're going and what needs to be done. And then within that broader framework, within that shared context, then they can go off and apply their own ideas. They can respond to the contingencies and particularities of the things they're working on.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm just going to do another just plug for questions. So if people who are watching at the moment want to ask questions to Marshall, please, either if you're a registered Google account user, then send them through on the Google Plus questions or Google Hangouts questions, or send them to #ThinkDiff on Twitter, and we're actually getting those coming in live at the moment. So please do post your questions. The other question that a few people have asked is, where can I get hold of the system maps? So if you go onto the same page where you actually logged in to watch this webcast, you'll actually find links to 3 short videos that Marshall has created, where he actually talks us through 3 different areas. The first one is a primer on systems innovation. What is it and why is that of interest to us? The second is a map of how the economy works in terms of the kind of global financial system. And the third one is a bit more specifically around the sustainable finance system. And there's a PDF on there that you can print. I warn you, you need a big printer, but you can print that and or go over that. And that actually looks at the systems innovation process. It kind of breaks it down. It's a really useful resource for you to have a look at. So,
yeah,
Dan, sorry.
So I actually also have the sustainable finance map as well, which I owe you, which we can put up.
Okay, so we'll try and upload that as soon as possible after this session. So I've got a question here. It's been asked actually twice on. So we're talking about systems innovation. How does discrete innovation, so kind of individual innovations, how can they actually fit into achieving this complex systems change? Is it possible for kind of individual innovation to disrupt the global financial system? Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So as innovators are designing their solutions, there is I suppose a fine line between something that is so disruptive that it is unimplementable and it just doesn't fit within the prevailing system, and there's no way to begin to integrate it into how things are done. And that's the problem often is that we're not starting from scratch. We are starting with an existing system. So we either need to figure out a transformation plan, which then starts with what we've got and begins to gradually shift it. Or sometimes there are opportunities for greenfielding ideas. So sometimes for entrepreneurs, you can start a business which is a from scratch, start alone thing, and if you can grow that, then that is a path to change. It's more difficult within something like the finance system because it is a very well-established system. People don't really yet work completely outside of it. Everything still kind of needs to go through somewhat accepted channels. So there is certainly a great need for radical innovation, but that innovation has to be, if it's going to be put in an existing system, smartly conceived. So that's where for an innovator, you want to be smart about how you look around the ecosystems that are out there and design a solution that is practical enough and clever enough to find its way into the way things are currently working, and then scale from there. So
sure.
I think that's where what systems innovation or systems thinking ideas have to offer the individual innovator is that sense of the broader ecosystem and how you can begin to insert your idea into what's already going on.
And you mentioned at one point that when you've shown this to some people who are within the financial system, so they may work in it, that actually they were quite surprised at what your systems map looked like and how they fitted in, I think. And one of the things I was actually wondering was, this isn't necessarily a discipline which people are particularly familiar with. I mean, that's a bit of a question, but you don't really learn about systems innovation at school. If you're lucky, you might learn how to innovate a product in something like design technology or business studies, I guess. But do you think that the kind of governments and institutions and corporations which ultimately would be required to make this transition are aware of systems innovation and the need to be able to map out complex systems, or do you think that's something that we need to focus more around in terms of when we look at education and bringing people's capabilities along in that way?
Yeah, it's been encouraging to see over the last few years that the idea that we need systemic change has actually seemed to catch on. So I know I'm looking for it, but I think I've seen a lot more in sort of the popular discourse that we've got systemic problems that need to be solved at the systems level. So that idea seems to have more currency. I think there's still People don't really know a lot about how to do that, and there's not very much in the way of formal systems thinking or systems innovation going on out there. I mean, it's been around for a while. It's not a particularly new idea, but it's always been a very niche, kind of nerdy idea on the technical end. It's kind of this the system dynamics world is a very small, kind of nerdy field, or it's this very kind of new agey, woolly thinking thing around systems innovation. So it's never really caught on in the mainstream, but hopefully we're starting to see a bit of shift there where people are starting to pick it up. So not a lot of formal work going on out there, but there are, I think, a lot of good natural systems thinkers. So they might not call it that or think of it that way, but there are some just brilliant natural systems thinkers who do think in this broader way about the ecosystem and how different players need to work together and how the social environment and the physical environment fit together and how you need to think about things longitudinally and how you drive intergenerational feedback. I'm thinking of Jeffrey Canada of the Harlem Children's Zone, who's like one of the most brilliant system thinkers I've ever met, and he'd never call it that, but you can just see the way he's thought through the way they've been able to transform education and the neighborhood. That is absolutely what he's doing. Yeah.
Fantastic. I've got a question here as well around, so one of the benefits of kind of linear throughput systems or simple systems are that they're very easy to measure. So you put something in and it spits something out at the other end. If you change something, you can quite easily see the correlation of that change. What about like complex systems? I mean, maybe this is a stupid question, but are they harder to measure the outputs of, and how do we go about addressing that challenge? Or is there a way that we can actually not need to worry about that so much? How do we deal with the kind of the fact it's very difficult to see what comes out of a complex system when you make a change?
Yeah, that's one of the great things about being a systems change kind of consultant person, is that there's no way you can measure we've actually done a good job or not, because it's impossible to tell down the road in a way, and it's because if you and part of my background on this was coming from the complexity theory end of it, and one of the main revolutionary tenets of complexity theory was about the unpredictability of complex systems, which means that you can't, because of the chaotic nature of them, you cannot predict with any degree of accuracy where things are going to evolve. But the actual converse of that is that looking backwards in a complex system, there's no way to accurately discern cause and effect to say that the reason the system changed into its current state is because of X, Y, and Z. There's no way you can say that. It's the reverse of that. Unpredictability is the the undescribability of causal change. So,
and I imagine that makes it quite difficult for governments and people who are basically saying, right, we need to do the following. We're going to put X amount of resource or whatever it is into changing something, but we're actually not able to tell you right now what the impact's going to be, but we think generally the direction of travel is the right way, but we're going to stimulate something which we think is positive, but we can't tell you quite what's going to take place.
Yeah, and you see all the time that vagueness that politicians or people in government, if something goes well, it was obviously because of the things they did, and if things go wrong, it was obviously stuff that was out of their control or that they didn't have anything to do with, and they have a sort of plausible deniability and plausible credit taking on either end, because it's really impossible to say with certainty what caused what and resulted in things.
Sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I've got a question here as well around in some of the diagrams that you've got elements of the actual industrial ecology and the circular economy in terms of how that could work and how that's basically like a growth engine that the system conditions operate around. So what actually happens in the real economy? Would you be able to talk a little bit around how you see the importance of the system conditions in accelerating a circular economy, like what all this really means, the kind of global financial system, how getting that right may be important in accelerating the circular economy?
Mm. Um, so I think the key to getting the circular economy off the ground is making the business case for it. So connecting the circularity to business value. So the waste that we're trying to get rid of and the inefficiency we're trying to drive, if we cannot somehow connect that directly to the bottom line, it's going to be really difficult for businesses to take it up, and it's going to be even harder for investors to put money into it. So that is really, really key, and that's where finance can't really change that equation. That's a matter of innovators creating innovations that are compelling enough and have a good enough value proposition, and it's also about the regulatory environment and consumer preferences changing enough to make the business model more compelling. So,
Yeah, and I guess
and that's where the people who are innovating around technology and business models, that's where their genius is really needed, is to make that compelling value proposition.
yeah, and I guess your point there would be that those businesses and some of them who already can demonstrate the kind of financial arbitrage of going from a linear take, make, dispose model to one that is more restorative and beginning to decouple growth from resource constraints, or that those kind of companies, because they are demonstrating more profitability and more resilience, they will find finance effectively, and the financial system will then play the role that it plays in quite effectively allocating finance towards that new part of the economy which is starting to outperform another part of the economy. So effectively, I guess what you're saying is if the circular economy works from a economic perspective in terms of creating value, the financial system adapts and evolves to be able to facilitate that.
Yes, and there's the finance system is not dumb. It is a extremely in ways extremely rational system. So if there is money to be made, people people will figure that out, and they're very good at doing due diligence. They're very good at running the numbers. So that is a huge strength of the finance system, and they're great. Sanity checks on whether something is working. So there's lots of smart people and good thinking and a resource there to be used, but it has to be connected at least to finance, because sustainability, a business has to be sustainable in the sense of making enough profit to keep going, as well as doing the other social and environmental things we'd like it to do.
Very good. And so, given in mind that a lot of the audience that we'll have on are the people who will probably make up the next generation of entrepreneurs and innovators who are designing the future economy. So we've got a lot of people who are university students around the world or other emerging entrepreneurs. It sounds like systems innovation may be a kind of key discipline to going forward into the future economy, in terms of something that like we would be able to apply to anything, whether we were designing a product, whether we were looking at a new business model, whether we were trying to explore a new market effectively. It's like a discipline that we could employ. What would you suggest that a kind of somebody who's very interested in this topic did to find out more about that? So there's obviously the 3 videos that we've uploaded. There's your process for systems innovation. You also mentioned somebody in Harlem who you thought was a great systems innovator. Are there other great pieces of work or content that people should refer to in order to dig a little bit deeper into this topic?
Yeah, I wish there were a great, sort of seminal book I could reference. There are a few that have come out for a long time now, but none I would say is, I find particularly what I would call the Bible of it, and there aren't, as you say, not a lot of places you can really go to study. I think there are a few now which are starting to move in that direction, certainly more than when I was in school. In terms of specific things now and that I've seen recently. The Nesta has done a series on, I think they call it systems innovation. There's some good pieces in there, and they actually have a great toolkit about for how to do business model design and other things. So that
so
actually
Nesta, the UK organization.
Yeah, exactly. And I forget the name of the toolkit, but if you go online there, it's online. They have, especially for entrepreneurs and social businesses and things like that. There's some great frameworks for thinking.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that we actually share that using Twitter to anybody who's online, so that they can get hold of that as well. We'll dig that out.
And Forum for the Future, also there in London, is really some of the best practitioners in doing systems innovation. They have a small pamphlet they've written on the topic, and if you look at the projects they run there, they have their different descriptions of their projects, which are great examples of trying to do this kind of multi-stakeholder industrial systems change.
Fantastic. And I've got sort of one last question really coming through, which is around what's next for the exercise. So if you had all the resource, all the opportunity in the world, so you've already created a bit of a stir in the financial community by mapping it effectively and allowing people to see where they sit within the system and how that impacts the systemic change. What would you like to see happen next?
Well, so for our piece of this problem, which is trying to create this integrated map of the terrain and what needs to change and who is doing what to create that change, we are actively working on creating a much more advanced version of the map, which will be both online and interactive, and allow you to navigate the complexity of the map a little better, and just in terms of some fairly basic things, in terms of providing the ability to link to external resources and organizations and to zoom in and zoom out, but ultimately both for sustainable finance and for lots of the other problems we have. I would love to see that evolve into a systems visualization, a systems innovation platform, which would be a hub for building out a kind of atlas of systems maps, and maps that can be somewhat wikiable in that people can contribute and comment, and we can actually co-create maps in a virtual way rather than the way we currently do it, which is still on the cutting edge technology of printed maps and sticky notes, which work pretty well, but it just seems to me that we should be able to get beyond that. Fantastic.
Well, Marshall, thank you very much for providing this insight into the maps, and also for your insight into systems innovation. I just also want to point the participants of today's session to some other opportunities around this. As part of the Rules of the Game series within the Disruptive Innovation Festival, we also have a session on Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. GMT with representatives from a leading pension fund and private equity organization who are going to be providing an insight into financing the circular economy. So once we go from the kind of systems condition into the different actors within the financial system, we've got two of those organizations or players who are going to provide an insight into how they think the circular economy will take place from a financing perspective. I also wanted to point you as well towards a session that we have with William Madonna, so one of the co-authors of Cradle to Cradle, who will be giving a session on redesigning the future at 5 p.m. GMT on Monday. So that will be a session which will be streamed from Cisco studio in London around the world. So finally, thank you again to Marshall for joining us for a most informative and fascinating insight into systems innovation, and also for all those participants for taking part. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Disruptive Innovation session. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. It's great talking with you.